Firstly, I want to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this month's webcast. For those of you who I haven't yet met or who may be new to the network, my name is Alice Brugger. I lead our Customer Success Network webcast series, and I'm also part of the Customer Success team at Slack. So we have a really great session lined up today. We'll be learning all about mindset and how we can develop a leadership mindset for high-performing teams. Today, we are very lucky to be joined by James Cook, who is a certified coach and mentor, and James runs Next Level Coaching and Performance Improvement. The conversation that we're going to be having today, I think, is a really good opportunity to hear from James on his perspective of leadership, on what high performance is, and also what's required in terms of developing the right mindset and the right culture in order to really thrive as a leader. I think it's going to be a great session. How do I know it's going to be great? Well, I have to admit, James and I have actually done some one-on-one coaching. So I already have firsthand experience of just really how useful it is to focus and to begin to think more about my mindset. Now, before I hand over to James, I wanted to share two of the quick usual notices. Firstly, is that we do want this session to be as interactive as possible. Thank you to everyone who answered our initial poll. We will actually be running a couple of polls throughout today. So really encourage you to sort of share your thoughts via those. And then, of course, we will also have the chat box and the Q&A box, and we will pause for questions at about halfway through and also at the end. So please do anything that pops up, share your thoughts, and I'll make sure that we have time to cover it off with James. And then final thing to say is that we won't be live streaming this in our workplace community. I will be sharing a recording via our YouTube channel. But as I did last time, what I'll also be doing is in workplace, I'll share a quick recap of some of my key takeaways. And one of the things I'd love to do is continue the conversation in there. So if you have any key takeaways or any sort of follow-up questions or thoughts, jump back into workplace and we can continue to connect there as well. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to James and just say thank you, James, again for joining us. And yeah, really looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Alice. I will start talking now. And since it's my thing, I'm going to be talking for a long time, but make sure that you stop me when you need to stop me, because as anyone who knows me knows, I can talk about this stuff for a very long time. So welcome everybody to this conversation on leadership mindset. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking through some principles and some ideas on how to help you guys who are in leadership positions get to that next level of your performance in leadership. And also we're going to talk about some stuff that you who are thinking about moving into leadership can be thinking about as you move towards that transition. And the quote I want to start off with today is this one, is that you can't play a symphony alone. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to write stuff because I want this to be interactive. So get something to write with now, be it the old-fashioned pen and paper, be it electronic notepad. And I want you to write whatever first comes to mind when you read this quote. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to do that right now. There are no right or wrong answers to this. You're not going to be sharing them. It's for you for reflection. What comes up when you see this quote? All right, bit of online virtual world admin. If I suddenly disappear, I really hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, I will come back. I'll put my phone on data mode, so don't worry, I will return. Just be considering what I've just spoken about. If you disappear, do what you need to do and come back. We will be here. So welcome to how to develop the leadership mindset for high-performing teams. This is a lot about mindset and a little bit about culture, but entirely about leadership. So what I'm going to do, I have two aims for today. I first want this to be helpful. I want to help you in however you want that help for your leadership career. And I want to challenge your thinking a little bit. So there'll be some things that maybe make you feel a bit, I'm not sure about that, not sure how I feel about that. That's cool. Let it roll, let it see how it goes. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk, first of all, a little bit about me, next level, and the work we do, which informs our perspective on this stuff. We're then going to talk about what exactly is high performance leadership. Let's get clear on some definitions. We're then going to talk about what prevents us from high performance leadership, so mindset barriers. And a lot of the work that I do is helping leaders move barriers in their mindset that are holding them back from their next level of performance. Then into a little bit on culture, which of course is a leader's greatest asset. And then some lessons, a roundup and some next steps for you guys to find out more if you want to. So as we go through today, I'm going to be getting you to, as I told you before, write down your ideas. This is for self-reflection and it is confidential. Unless you really want to share it, you're more than welcome to, but it's just for you. And so there are no right or wrong answers to any of the questions I'm going to be asking. There's only real answers, honest answers. So consider this a group coaching conversation where I can't see you. Think about it for yourselves, get your own answers going. What we're also going to be doing, as Alice said, is we're going to be doing some polls. So wherever you see this little icon, there'll be a poll coming up, which Alice is very ably running. And so you'll get a chance to share your thoughts there. All right, first of all, our perspective, next level, and who we are. We are specialists in organizational high performance for companies in transition. So what that means is we work with teams, individuals, and entire organizations to help them manage a change in the best way that they can as it relates to their high performance. And of course, a change can be really anything in business. And what this has done is it's informed our perspective on leadership. We coach hundreds of leaders. Some of the coaches at Next Level have been leadership coaches for over 20 years. I, of course, don't look quite that old just yet, but I coach a lot of leaders, particularly those who are moving towards first-time leadership or middle management. And so what this has done is given us a very intimate look into what principles of leadership mindset are helpful, what aren't helpful, the barriers that leaders tend to face, because there are themes, there are commonalities. And so what you're going to see here is a distillation of those lessons that we've learned. So what is high performance leadership? What I'm going to get you to do now is I want you to think of your favorite example of high performance leadership. So who is a leader that you love? It can be someone you know, someone you work for, someone you used to work for, or someone you don't know, but someone that's famous for leadership. And I would like you to write their name down now. As we go through today, I want you to use that person as something of a reference point for the stuff I'm going to talk about and see where some of the things and these ideas that I'm going to talk about fit into this idea of leadership, maybe where they don't. But I want you to have in mind them as kind of an anchor for this thing we call high performance leadership, because in anything to do with performance, there are three key things we want to be doing. The first is get the right perspective on it. So if we have a negative view of leadership, we're going to go to it or go at it negatively. If we have a great perspective of leadership, a clear perspective, we're going to go into it with greater clarity. And so first and foremost, we've got to get clear on what this thing is. Principles are ways of acting, and we're going to look at some principles in just a moment. Principles guide our behavior, our thought process, and are the foundational stones of a high performance mindset. And then techniques are ways of deploying those principles. Those are short, sharp, sometimes larger techniques, ideas, skills that deploy those principles in a particular situation. So we're going to go through some of this today. I want to offer some analogies for leadership. The first is that of an orchestra conductor. If you are a leader, you are an orchestra conductor. And there's a few reasons why I feel that this analogy is useful to remember. The first is that you cannot play a symphony alone. Now you know why that quote at the beginning was the one I chose. You can't play all the instruments. As good as you are, you can't play them all. You may have played one of those instruments the best in your previous life, but you can't do it now. More on that later on. Also, all eyes are on you, but you're not the focus anymore. It's about the team. And so that can be tricky, right? Because if it goes wrong, the blame is on you. But if it goes really well, you want to big up the team. And so everyone's kind of watching you, but they're kind of not at the same time. So you're in this weird place on the stage. And then to be most effective, you must stand apart from the orchestra. The conductor stands at the front. They stand up and apart from the orchestra because they need that perspective. So keep that in mind as we go through. The other analogy I want to offer you, and the one that I find most useful, is that of a frame to a canvas. All high performance needs structure. Structures save us from ourselves, and so they make sure that everything gets done that needs to get done. They maintain resilience. They maintain things as life takes its course. All achievement needs an arena. We need a field of play if we are to play at our best. And every single masterpiece that has ever been created had a frame. Now, the thing about this is it's not a glamorous definition, it's not a glamorous analogy, but it's a fundamental and very structural, very pragmatic analogy. And so it's my favorite. So think of yourselves as the structures to the frame. But ultimately, our perspective on leadership from what we have, from the work that we've done, is it's either one of these. So I want you to think now about which one is the most useful for you as you go through this. But either way, leadership is about direction and structure. That's the perspective I'm going to give you for now. So we've done some perspectives. This is a way of thinking. So as we go through this, I want you to remember leadership is the person I've chosen as my favorite example. It is also direction and structure. So let's get some principles as to how we can do this. And once again, principles are ways of acting. Principles guide our thoughts, our behaviors, and our actions as the journey unfolds. So they are internal. I'm going to offer some definitions of these principles. We're all going to understand them slightly differently, but they ultimately provide a focal point for our thoughts. When we're in a situation, we can deploy a principle, and it might inform our way of going about that situation. So I'm going to talk through 6 different principles of leadership. There are more, but these are the ones I've chosen for today. And we're going to go through each one. I'm going to talk about why they're helpful to you. And the first one is balance. And balance is kind of like the overarching principle of leadership. And I'm defining balance in this way: just the right amount, in the right way, at the right time. There is a great book to read. It's called Extreme Ownership, and it's by a former Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink. And he talks about the dichotomy of leadership, how you need to have confidence to be a leader, but if you have too much, you're arrogant and no one likes you. If you have too little, you can't get the job done. And there's so many different dichotomies within leadership. And so ultimately, it's your job as the leader to find the right balance for you that suits your personality, that suits your team, that suits your industry, that suits your role. But balance is the principle I want you to always be thinking of as you go through your leadership career. The next one is intentionality, being deliberate and proactive in our actions towards a clear goal. So this is about knowing why you're doing things, about having clarity over the goal, which we've all heard talked about, but in leadership, it's just as important. Why are you having that particular conversation? What is it you want to get from that one-to-one, and so on and so forth? And the reason for that is that the more intentional that you are in your actions, the more confident you're going to be in your actions. If you're more confident in your actions, you're going to inspire trust and confidence in your team. And if they are more confident, they're going to perform at a higher level because they've got that confidence. And so you've got your high performance team. And it's also efficient. If you know what you want to get from a meeting, you can probably get the meeting done in less time than if you haven't really got that clarity around the objectives. Next up is objectivity, which I'm going to define as seeing things as they are, not how we want them to be. It can be very, very tempting, certainly as a first-time leader, to look at things through the lens of the job that you used to do. Now, let's take customer success, because that's where we are. If you were a customer success manager and you've moved to team leader, there might be parts of that role that you love to do, enjoyed, were really good at. And so you might tend to gravitate towards that stuff as a leader and not some of the stuff that you don't love to do. But you are now the structure, you are now the frame. And so you must maintain that resilience. Oftentimes you can be the deciding vote between 2 or more people who have a disagreement. And so you have to be objective about how you make that decision. It can't just be subjectivity. You have to see the whole playing field, and you need to get done what needs to be done, not just what you're good at. This is a big mindset barrier that I see in first-time leaders, is they end up doing the job they did because they're comfortable there, they're confident there, and leadership can be scary. But you have other roles and responsibilities that aren't going to get done if you don't do them. The next principle is humility, being part of something bigger than oneself. I love this quote about humility by John Wooden, who was the UCLA men's basketball coach for many, many decades, in fact. The main ingredient of stardom is the rest of the team. Yeah, you got the top job, you're now the leader, but it's about the team. The team are going to get you there. Now, and before you can lead someone, they want to be led, they need to want to be led by you. And if you don't show humility, no one's ever going to want to be led by that kind of person. Also, leadership is never done. Don't be fooled into thinking, okay, I've got them, that's it. Leadership is an ongoing thing. And so showing that humility very pragmatically, going, okay, what can I be doing better? What can I be working on here in the leadership realm is going to help you in the long run. And a way to get trust, and this comes from Daniel Coyle and the Culture Code, to get trust, show vulnerability, show your human side, show that you are not perfect, because people buy into that. People will respond, they will help you out. And so that takes humility to do it. So humility can get you to that vulnerability place, and vulnerability will get you trust from the team. Next up is empathy. Now, some of you in the audience might recognize the person that this quote is attributed to. Julia Fern is a leader that I work with. She's been on the podcast that I am on that's all to do with leadership, and she defines empathy really well. So I've kind of stolen her definition, but she's fine with it. I checked. So empathy is about taking the other person's story into account. It's not sympathy. So if one of your team members has a problem, it doesn't mean you cry along with them, but what it doesn't mean is you ignore their problems. If they've got something going on at home that's personal, it's all connected. It's all joined up. The reason for this image is if one of these guys is out of time, the whole boat comes to a halt. And so you've got to take the other person's story into account. And it's about listening with empathy, which is, as Julia says, listening to them and seeing them as humans, the whole picture, not just their role, but them as people. Because if you do, you might get some extra stuff that will help you lead them better and help them achieve their high performance. And ultimately, empathy, while it sounds a bit less than cold, hard business metrics, it can influence that stuff. So productivity, if the team are listened to, if they're feeling in a good place, they're going to be more productive. Their morale is going to be better, so they're going to stay with you longer. It's going to be better for their longevity. They're not going to be as stressed, so they're not going to burn out. And so you're not going to have to find replacements, and they're going to be on long-term leave. And ultimately, your relationships are your leadership capital, and empathy is the principle that will get you the most capital possible. Integrity, walking your talk. My guess is that the leader you wrote down as your favorite example did what they said they were going to do. They acted with integrity. So do the same. It can be hard at times, but ultimately that's what's going to get you that respect. And integrity is, you need that clarity and that intentionality to know what your standards are, but people buy into credibility and legitimacy. So once you set those standards, you have to be the example. That can be hard, that can seem unfair at times, but you as the leader are now the example. Set and maintain your standards and act to them, and people will follow you. Because ultimately, if the frame is unstable, we cannot paint a masterpiece. Waiting for my slides. All right, so here is our first poll. I would love to hear from you. Which principle do you value most in a leader? Is it balance, intentionality, objectivity, humility, empathy, or integrity? And Alice, I'm guessing you'll be able to read out the results because I can't see them.
Yeah, I will share them. I'll give everyone 10 seconds more to respond. I see we've got 13, 14 responses so far. It's ticking up. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and then I will actually share the results. So you should all be able to see that now. So up front, we have integrity with 56%, but a close follow on is humility and intentionality, both with 25% of the votes.
All right, cool. Okay, so integrity is the key here. This is the lesson to take away. So we value it most in leaders. And so ironically enough, if we value that most in others, we should probably do it ourselves as leaders. So here we go, cool. Right, what I want to do now is open the floor to a few questions. I will get Alice to read them out, if that's cool with you, Alice, because again, I can't see the questions coming in.
Yeah, so everyone feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box, or actually, if it's easier, feel free to jump into the chat and I will read them out as we go. Whilst people begin to form their questions, I have a quick question myself, so I'll take the floor first, if that's okay. Cool. Like giving everyone a minute or two to think. I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about objectivity and the fact that often as sort of newer leaders, it can be a bit scary because we're not necessarily doing what we used to do and probably do quite well.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we should initially be thinking about, okay, acknowledging that it's scary, but also taking the first steps to kind of, I suppose, get over that fear?
Yeah, so I was coaching a leader about this yesterday, in fact. So we were talking about a very scary and frankly not a very fair position that they were in through the company context and so on and so forth. And when we are fearful or in any kind of emotional state, we start to ask questions, because thinking is really just asking ourselves questions and answering those questions. And what tends to happen is we start asking loads of what if questions. Well, what if this? And what if I mess that up? And what if I make the wrong choice? And what if that person doesn't deliver? And what happens, what happens, what happens? The what if questions can be useful sometimes, but if they're fear-based, then they probably won't be, because you'll ask fearful questions and you'll get fearful answers. And so what can be helpful is to write out those questions. And there's a great exercise on fear setting, which is a Tim Ferriss TED talk. So I encourage you to go find that. If you type in Tim Ferriss fear setting, you'll find a really cool exercise to do on how to, if not remove your fears, you can certainly reduce it. But my thing is, change the what if to what is. And that sounds really trite, but what is the current situation? What are the facts? What do you know? And what are the best choices you can make in that moment? And acknowledge that you're probably going to make choices out of fear. And so maybe go slightly the other way. Also, talk to people. I noticed that new leaders tend to think they need to know all the answers, which they don't. No one knows all the answers. And so what happens then is they don't ask for help because they feel like they should know all the answers. And then they end up making maybe not the best choice. So ask for help, figure out what is rather than what if, and check out Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise.
Right, that's super useful. Yeah, I'm gonna dig that out and I'll try and either link it in the chat or share as a follow-up as well. I don't think we have any other questions right now. So I think people are probably still sort of forming their thoughts around this. So maybe we sort of carry on, and then we'll definitely make sure that we have questions at the end as well.
Yep, there will be time for questions at the end. All right, so if now we know what, or we have a perspective on what high performance leadership is, the real question and my main focus, or the main focus of my work, is what prevents us from high performance leadership? Because we all have an idea of how we want to be when we go into a meeting or go into a team stand up or whatever it might be. And we have that idea and we get in, and then all of a sudden we're nervous and we shrink and we don't follow through exactly how we'd like to. So let's take a moment to look at what might prevent us. And to do that, I want to set out with some definitions. And these definitions are brought to you by this quote, which is frankly how I live my life. I am an old man who has known a great many troubles, most of which have never happened. It's all about mindset. It's all about what we think we know rather than what we actually know. And so here's a definition of mindset. Mindset is our perspectives, beliefs, or approach towards a task or situation. And the reason that this random cartoon that I'm sure you've probably all seen is in front of you is if I say to you, rabbit, you will see a rabbit. If I now ask you to, or I now say to you, duck, you'll see a duck. It's the same picture, but the perspective, the mindset has changed. And the reason I like this picture is because it demonstrates how you can change your mindset. Most people think you can't, but you can. It sometimes can take work, but your mindset will determine your performance and your capacity in any given situation. Mindset barriers are how we get in our own way. So I'm going to be talking a bit about mindset barriers for the next few minutes. And this is all to do with us getting in our way. This is nothing to do with your team being whoever. This is nothing to do with the economic conditions or pandemic conditions or working remotely. None of that. It's all to do with us. Now, the great news there is that we can do something about it because ultimately it's our minds. The hard thing about it is they can seem insurmountable. But as I hope this little picture will show you, it's about perspective again. It can seem immovable, but it's not. I'm telling you, because I do this for a living. So let's look at some mindset barriers that I have seen be fairly common across new and first time, and frankly, some senior managers too. Imposter syndrome, protectiveness, and entitlement. So let's look at imposter syndrome first of all. Imposter syndrome is feeling like you're pretending. Is going, who am I to be doing this? Who am I to be in this position? Who am I to be? Who am I to be? Who am I to be? And it just becomes this fear loop of, oh my God, someone's going to find out that I don't know. Which, by the way, is why a lot of people don't ask for help, because they see that as a sign of weakness, of like they're going to find out that I'm pretending, but it's not. And this quote, I think, is quite poignant here. Is it's not what you are that holds you back; it's what you think you're not. So if you spend your time thinking, I'm not good enough for this role, that's going to consume you. That's going to get you into trouble. So imposter syndrome is a big barrier. I'm telling you right now, everyone has felt it in their time, maybe to a more or less of an extent and more or less frequently. But anyone who says they have never experienced imposter syndrome is probably not telling you the whole truth or is not aware of it. Okay, either way, they could use some coaching, send them my way. But imposter syndrome is a thing. It's completely understandable. It happens to us all. The challenge with first-time leadership is, until now, our performance was directly within our control. So we could control our metrics, we could control the amount of work that we did, and if we had a problem, we could go solve it more or less by ourselves. And so it's kind of like, and if you're an A-type person like I am, and I'm guessing some of the people on this call might be, it's like a me, I need to achieve, I need to be seen as A+, A star, A whatever. Now you're in a position where your personal performance is dictated by others' personal performance. And that can mess with your head, especially if you're used to doing it all yourself. So that's where imposter syndrome kicks in, and the fear of, oh God, my performance isn't going to be seen the way I want it to. We can all just agree that imposter syndrome is a thing. We all get it from time to time. When you are experiencing a bout of it, I want you to be aware, doing too much, right? I need to prove myself. I need to prove that I'm a leader who's capable. So I'm just going to do their work for them and show them that I can do it. I'm going to do it like that because I know how to do it, or I want them to know that I know how to do it. Or doing too little, right? If I speak up, if I ask for help, if I don't say anything, people won't know that I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to keep quiet. Or I'm the boss. So if I'm the boss, I shouldn't do the work. They should do what I say. More on that later on. And so I'm going to prove it by not doing the thing, telling them what to do, being dictatorial, so on and so forth, or maybe even micromanaging. Either way, it's not cool. The people you work for won't like it. It won't get you to where you want to be. And it's all fueled by fear, which we're going to call imposter syndrome. It could be that your boss back in the day had imposter syndrome themselves, and they either did too much or too little. Don't repeat the cycle, right? Get a bit of clarity, do a bit of reflection, maybe get a bit of coaching, but think about where the imposter syndrome is coming from, recognize it, and then make sure you stay objective. So that's where that principle of objectivity can come in really, really handy for you. So let's talk about a few other ways to tackle imposter syndrome. Forget your title. Titles are just titles. They're just words on an email signature. What is your role? What are you there to do? If you're customer success, you're there to make sure that your clients are onboarded properly, which means if we take out all the corporate speak, it means they're there to love what they get, full value for what they're paying for, understand what you do and love it so they never ever want to leave. And also your role is maybe to offer other things. Hey, do you also want this? Do you want this? You're there to solve the problems, make sure they love the company. That's all you're there to do. And so if you're the team leader of customer success, your job is to help your team do that. That's it. Forget the titles and just figure out what is it that I need to be doing to fulfill my role. And I find it really useful and actually more difficult than you think to explain your role to a child, because they don't understand what onboarding is, right? They don't understand those make-up words that we've made up. Make it real, get it really, really simple so that you can then go, okay, that's my role, let me go do that. Think about what skills got you here, and then know that some of the skills that got you here, like working all hours and being busy, may not get you further. Because if the leader is busy, they can't see the whole field. And so the ship is without someone steering it. Okay, so you need to, that busy thing will need to be worked on. And that's an example. Walk your talk, so integrity. I find that people who are doing what they say they're going to do, living by their values, living by the way they believe it should be done, will feel more confident than those who don't. And just do your best. That's all you can really do, which again, sounds like a truism, but I promise if you get to the end of the day and it's been miserable, but you did everything that you could, you'll feel a lot better about it than if you held back a little bit. And use your team. If you take nothing else away from this slide, I want it to be this. Use your team. People who have some imposter syndrome are first-time leaders. They tend to want to do it all themselves or micromanage. Neither is a good choice. We've already talked about that. If you could do it all, you wouldn't need a team. So please let me be the one to tell you, you can't do it all. Let your team do it. They should be better at it than you, or at least as good as you are. And if you are better than them, teach them how to be better than you. Because if you're better at it than them, you should have stayed doing that role and they should have your job. You now have a different role. You shouldn't be doing the thing you used to do. Otherwise, you should have stayed there. Use your team. Let them be great so that they can make you look good. All right. Now we move on to the next one, which is protectiveness. This is one that I noticed really come to the fore in the coaching conversations with leaders as the pandemic started. And it's only exposing your team to the positive, which is, oh, I don't want to scare them with the bad news. I want to protect them from whatever. And it's really well intentioned and it can be quite noble, but leaders can start to say, oh, it's my job to protect them from the horrible boss that I report to, or the bad market conditions, or uncertainty, right? We don't know what's happening with the company. It's not always helpful. Of course, there are things that you can't divulge. Of course, there's confidentiality. Of course, all of that stuff. But people talk whether you give them something to talk about or not. And in one particular example, a fairly senior leader was leaving and they weren't communicating that to the team because they didn't want it to be seen as a sign of weakness of the company and it was all going wrong. The problem with that was he wasn't answering his email and people knew he had gone. And so rumors started going. And the rumors become worse than the reality. Also, if you are protecting them from bad news situations, you are not building their resilience. When I became a father, which was 18 months ago, I was talking to one of my mentors about what was his parenting advice. And he said his one thing was, everyone says they want to protect their children, but it's actually the job of a parent to prepare them for when you can't protect them. Which to me was a massive light bulb moment. And I think it's true for our teams, is our job is to prepare them for the bad news situations, not protect them from them, because we can't anyway. And if they are more resilient, they're going to get through it better, and so on and so forth. Now, over on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see some of the principles we talked about. Balance is key. You can't tell them everything, nor should you, but it's about being balanced. It's about being intentional. Why am I telling them this? And about being empathetic. Am I telling them in the right way for them? But being clear about things is being kind to them. Keeping them in the dark is not necessarily. And where there are mistakes, where there are difficult situations, use them as valuable lessons, use them as teachable moments, rather than just hiding them and missing out on that teaching opportunity. And then the final one is what I've called entitlement, is assuming that because you have that title, they should do what you say. That's not how it works. It maybe did in our parents' generation, except not really. Certainly doesn't now. People will just leave. And there's a book called $1 Trillion Coach. I highly recommend it for aspiring leaders. It is something of a biography of one of the coach who coached most of the Silicon Valley leaders at Google and Apple and all that kind of thing. It's a great book. And one of the stories from him coming up was his boss, Donna Dubinsky, who said, your title makes you a manager, your people make you a leader. Just because you have the title doesn't mean they're going to do what you say. And so understanding that is helpful. And why do some people think that? Well, because maybe they had a boss that thought that was the way, and they were dictatorial, and they told it, this is how it is, and my way and the highway, or the highway, and all that kind of stuff. And so they had to put up with that. So they go, okay, well, that must be A, how it's done, and B, I had to put up with that. So now they have to put up with that. Break the cycle. And strong leaders talk tough, right? This is could be fueled by imposter syndrome. No, they don't. I bet some of the best leaders that you've written down in the examples are not these dictatorial types. My bet is that we have 17, 18 people on the call. I reckon nearly 18 of those examples were people who are not dictatorial, authoritarian, and telling it how it is. I reckon they're a lot more human than that. That's just my guess. So don't be fooled. Don't be sucked into that. It can be frustrating when people don't do what you say, but don't get caught in the entitlement thing. Work the relationship first. It's one thing to be respected or feared and respected. It's another thing entirely to be liked and respected. That's where the power lies. Get them to want to do it for you, right? Don't just tell them do it because. No, that doesn't work anymore. Get into their shoes, step into their shoes and go, how can I get them to want to do it? Sometimes they won't want to do it and you'll have to go, hey, look, we need this for the team or whatever it might be. But you're a leader now, you've got to motivate people. And then get the same side of the table as them. And this is a concept that a mentor of mine had told me before, and it makes a lot of sense, is rather than be combative, rather than it being me versus you, getting you to do the thing, let's be on the same team, because you are on the same team, and figure out, how do we get this thing done? How do I help you achieve this? All right, poll number 2, here we go. I'm really keen to see which one is going to come out on top here. I want you to be nice and honest. I'm assuming that the poll is anonymous. Alice, is that true?
Yeah, it is anonymous.
Cool. So you can be nice and honest here. Which barrier is, or is most likely to be, if you're not yet a leader, most likely to be your biggest growth opportunity, or which is the biggest barrier that you have?
Counts are ticking up. We've got a couple more people still left to respond, so I'll give everyone 10 more seconds to get your anonymous responses in. Okay, I think we can call it. I'm going to end the poll. By far and away, the leader is imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
with 77%.
I knew it.
And then actually the only remaining one was protectiveness. So that's the remaining 23%.
Yeah. Everyone, the imposter syndrome thing is a talk all of its own. Just know that everyone experiences it from time to time. Everyone. And I know because I coach them on it. And so as you move into your role, you'll start to develop more confidence, and you'll start to be able to back yourself more in it. But for the early days, you're just going to feel fear and just roll with it and ask people, ask for help. You've got this wonderful network of people in a similar industry to you. I promise you there will be people that have walked in your shoes before. Reach out to them, right? Use this resource that you're a part of. Talk to people about it. Open up, because we've now demonstrated with numbers that most people feel it, so that you're not alone. All right, lovely. Here we go. We are now moving on to a few questions, if there are any, on the mindset barriers.
We haven't had any come through yet, but we'll give people a minute or so to have a think. And again, drop them into the Q&A or drop them into the chat if anything does pop up. I think for me, one thing that really resonates is with the imposter syndrome. I think, James, you were saying, you know, everyone feels this at some point in time. What I found really useful is actually having conversations with leaders that I really respect about the fact that they felt that. And I think there's some sort of stat related to like women and the fact that, you know, sometimes women can feel imposter syndrome even more so. And I think actually hearing from like leaders who've had that experience and asking them, you know, how did they overcome it? Or actually what I found really interesting is hearing that it doesn't just necessarily go away. Like you can continue to feel it, but it doesn't mean you're any less successful as well.
Yeah, completely. I think, sorry to jump in. I think the key words that you used there were manage rather than overcome. Because overcome is a lot of work and it probably won't happen. But if we learn to manage it and recognize, okay, I'm in a bit of a fear state, so I may make choices that are not ideal, and just being aware, I think awareness is a great place to start. Yeah.
We've had a couple of questions come through. Michaela has asked, what do you think about fake it before you make it in that approach?
I mean, I think that's fine. I think you want to be careful what it is you're faking. If you're faking knowing how to navigate a, I don't know, merger with two massive companies, maybe don't do that. But if it's projecting confidence, yeah, do that, because you might need to and you might not feel it in that moment. I think that's part of being a professional. It's not about lying. It's not about being inauthentic. It's just recognizing that, okay, right now I have to be a confident leader for my team. I don't feel that level of confidence. By the way, this was a conversation that happened a lot this time last year. There were a lot of leaders going, I don't know how to get through a pandemic and a recession, because we hadn't seen anything like that. And they didn't know what to do, but they needed to be there for their team. And so for Michaela, it's, yeah, fake it till you make it. Knowing that you might not make it, you might be scared a lot of the time, but eventually, if you keep doing your thing, showing integrity, being objective, asking for help, you'll find confidence outweighs the imposter syndrome. Wow, we've got questions flying in now.
We've got a couple coming in. So I'll follow up with Mike's question, because I think it also relates to imposter syndrome. So to keep the conversation going. So Mike has asked, is there any advice for preparing yourself for dealing with imposter syndrome before you're in a position or the moment that you feel it? Mike mentions that it feels like something you would manage better over time, but that it's harder to do from the outset of being in a leadership position or managerial position for the first time.
Yeah, so I think understanding what might trigger it, what kinds of situations or kinds of people might trigger it in you. So it might be, so for me, it's always been a sales situation, particularly a pitch, because that feels scary and there's decisions and I've got to ask for money and all that kind of stuff. And certainly when I was younger and I was pitching to people who were, I don't know, 20, 30 years older than me, I felt wickedly like I was pretending, because I was, and then I faked it till I made it. But so it was that kind of commercial situation where I felt like, who am I to be doing this? Individual coaching sessions, I tend not to feel it very much. I have on occasion, but it's rare, because I love this. I've done it a long time. It's more in line with my character. When I'm talking to nearly 20 people that I can't see, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of it. Like, I'm feeling a bit of fear. But I know those are the kinds of situations where I might feel it. And so I can do things to get me confident ahead of it. It might be listening to music. It might be going through my slides 27 times so that I know exactly what's going to happen. It might be having some notes here. I don't have notes here, but it could be that. It could be any number of things, and these are personal to you. And that's where a coach or a mentor could help you with that. Is help identify, all right, what are the triggers? What are the situations? What are the ways to manage it?
Really interesting. We've got two other questions specifically on imposter syndrome, and maybe we'll kind of combine them, because I think they're sort of connected. So Zach is interested to get your thoughts on sharing your sort of imposter fears and barriers with your leadership. You know, should you share that, show humility, or should you actually sort of keep that to be something more internal that you're working on and getting better at? So that's kind of one question. And then Johan has asked, what can leaders do to help employees get over the imposter syndrome? So potentially connected questions.
I think it's talking about it. I think to Zach's question, should you share it? I think so. I think it's balanced again. It's there are times where people will look to leaders to be the clarity, the structure, the direction, and then you're gonna have to just fake it till you make it. Quoting Michaela again. There will be times I'm a big fan of leaders engineering regular meetings that aren't just about hard, fast business stuff and more about conversation. Now that can be done in person. It can't always be done right now in person, but then sharing stories. And I think it's important the leader goes first, and that they go, look, this is a conversation about a mistake I made. I wonder if you would help me, because that's vulnerability, and vulnerability gets trust. Now, if you do that and your team are trustworthy enough to respond to that in kind, that sets the tone. So that's integrity. And by the way, if you don't trust the people that are working for you, why did you hire them? How do you help them get through it? I have found in my life, with my career, with some serious imposter syndrome, has been my mentors have helped me reframe it. Get a different perspective on it, get a bit of distance from it, put it in perspective. That kind of stuff can be really helpful. And then again, talking to, okay, what can you do to get that little bit of confidence? How can we help you get to a place that's a bit more confident in that? And then invest in coaching. I mean, that's slightly self-serving, but it's true. It doesn't have to be me. Coaches can help with that stuff.
Yeah, from personal experience, I think getting the perspective through coaching can be really useful. Actually, not even just in like professional life and what's going on, actually other areas as well. Okay, final question we have from Marika is, do you have any advice on finding mentorship? How do you choose a good mentor, and how do you offer or sort of convince them to develop a mentoring relationship?
So I think there's two questions in there. Finding a mentor, I would ask leaders that you admire and say, hey, do you know of anyone that can that would be good for me? And because that personal referral thing can be really powerful. I'll say this, if you're thinking about coaching for your team, you can't force someone to be coached. They have to want to do it. You can have the conversation and say, hey, I think this would be really helpful for you, but ultimately it has to be their choice. Otherwise it's going to go nowhere. And the reason for that is they have to be honest. They have to want to work at it, because coaching doesn't fix people. It helps them work on themselves and get themselves to the next level. A lot of it's to do with fit, chemistry, if you will. I don't know, the vibe between coach and coachee is very important, or mentor and mentee. With mentors, try and go someone who is sort of has been in your shoes like 5 years ahead of you, because they'll remember what it was like to be new, but they'll have had enough of extra experience that they can tell you a few more things. So those would be a few points. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, I think those are all the questions. So thank you for everyone's engagement, and we'll carry on. We've got about 12 more minutes so left, James, just to be aware.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Keeping me keen and keeping me honest. I like it. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit, and just a little bit, we're going to dip a toe into the pond of culture, because culture is the thing that leaders can use and build and maintain to support high performance over time. So if leadership and direction is, leadership is structure and direction, culture is about consistency. Culture is progress or not over time, because culture is how you do things over time, or how do we do things around here? That's ultimately what culture is. How do we do things around here? Because how we do things over here might be different to over here, but that's what it is. That's our official and unofficial rules of procedure. And so the key thing about culture as it relates to performance is you can feel a culture when you're in it. And I'm not talking about just in the building, I'm talking about in general, how you feel about the culture of the place that you work and the team that you work in. So culture can feel really energetic, in line, zipping along, everything in tune. By the way, it doesn't always have to feel like this. In fact, it shouldn't always feel like this, but it can feel just alive. And we've all had those moments where we've been into that collective flow. We've been in parts of teams that was just amazing. So culture can feel like that. It can also feel like this. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel dark and cold, and it can feel very isolating. Now, to all those who are leaders that are on this call, and all those who are thinking about becoming a leader, I ask you, which feeling do you think is better for high performance? This isn't a poll, because I'm pretty sure I know what you're all going to say. But this is why culture is so important. The problem with culture is it takes a long time to build, and it's never urgent. It's always the thing that you can put on the back burner, right? Because there's always a client that needs attention. There's always a thing. There's always another thing. But as I'm going to show you in just a minute, once a culture that's less than great takes effect, it's very, very hard to change, because it's so big and slow moving. So here's a few of culture's impact on internal performance for you to consider. It impacts motivation, because we as people, when we're part of a group, we're always thinking about that group, because we as humans want to belong. But we're also considering this culture. Do we want to be part of this? Or in this case, if it's motivation, do we want to give more to this? Or do I just want to kind of not? And that's a question that everyone's going to be asking most of the time as part of a team. Perspective. Is change good or is it bad? That's a cultural question. If culture is how do we do things around here, and we can view change negatively, fearfully, that's how it's going to be approached. If we see it as exciting and the opportunity involved, that's how we're going to look at it. And so that's a cultural question. Agility. How do we respond when things change? The cultures that were strong and united probably did all right during the last 18 months. Those that were scattered and disparate and every man for himself probably didn't. Resilience. Can we depend on each other when things get tough? And as you're going through this, I want you to think about, how do you think about the cultures that you're in, and do you think the people that you lead are answering these the way you want them to answer them? Or maybe are they not? And again, this is all just food for your own thought. You don't have to share that. And ultimately, culture is a retention thing. It's, hey, do I want to stay here? More and more now, we're seeing people that don't. They're leaving for cultural reasons. Well, you're going to force me to come back to work. That's not the cultural thing I want, so I'm going elsewhere. I didn't love how leadership dealt with a negative situation that was COVID, so I'm going elsewhere. Culture is important. It affects retention. It means if you're deliberate with your culture, you can keep your talent. If you're not, you might not. That's a very brief look at culture, because I'm aware of the time. I will be talking about culture in much greater detail on Monday, and I'll share some details with that if anyone is interested to join that virtually and find out why. But for culture, just be thinking about being intentional about it. Think about, how do you want people to feel as part of your team, and what can you do to start that? But knowing that not something that you can just put on the back burner and assume that it's going to be okay. You have to be deliberate about it. You have to be intentional about it. You have to be clear-minded about it. All right, I'm going to do a bit of wrap up and then talk about some next steps and then take any more questions that there are, because I don't want to run over time. I know you're all very busy. Leadership is direction and structure. You are either the orchestra conductor or you are the canvas frame. Either one, you're in the spotlight, but not really. All right, it's all about the team now. But you are the direction, you are the structure for high performance to take place. And so that, I invite you to consider that as the perspective through which you go about your leadership responsibilities and tasks. We talked about 6 of the principles of a high performance leadership mindset. Balance is doing just the right amount at the right time. Leadership is a nuanced thing. It's not a tick box exercise. It's not scheduled into boxes as much as we might try to think of it. It is a state of being. It is a constant work in progress. Intentionality, be deliberate. Know what you want to get from every interaction, be it an email, be it a meeting, be it a presentation. Know what you want to achieve so that you can be more deliberate with your actions, because that will inspire confidence in you, which will help imposter syndrome. It will inspire confidence in others. And if they feel confident, they can perform at a higher level. Be objective. Don't let your emotions take hold. You've got to see things for how they are, not how you wish them to be, because you've got to make decisions. You've got to make sure that everything is being done, not just the stuff that you like to do or that you prefer to do. Stay humble, right? The team is the star now. That can be a bitter pill to swallow if we like the limelight, but that's ultimately, you're going to get that limelight if you get the team to where they want to be. And the greatest or the best example I can think of is Michael Jordan. He was the lone warrior for a long time, and then along came Phil Jackson and convinced him that actually if he helped the team would help him. If you haven't seen The Last Dance, I don't know where you've been, but go check it out. It's amazing. It's a masterclass in leadership. Empathy, see the person as the human, listen to the whole story, because you will learn more about them, and that will help you get the most out of them and help you support them in their role. And integrity is walk the talk. Set your standards, live by those standards for you, not just your team. And that will build your credibility, which will build buy-in, which will build trust, which means the team will want to be led by you. Beware the 3 mindset barriers. There are more than just 3, but these are the main 3. We know now from the poll that imposter syndrome is the one that we all need to look out for. It's the fear of being found out, or the feeling of being like you're pretending. Forget your title. Don't worry about title. It's just words, made up words, really made up words. Just think about what you're here to do, what your team is here to do, and just focus on that. Think about the skills that got you to this leadership position and which ones you need to keep, and think about the ones that maybe you can let go, that you can retire. Thank them for their service, but let them go because you're now in a different position. Walk your talk, do your best, and use your team. You have the team for a reason. The team is there for a reason. You can't do it all. I'm telling you. Protectiveness, only exposing your team to the positive. They need to hear the bad stuff sometimes. Prepare them, don't protect them. And then entitlement is assuming they should do what you say because you have the title is not going to last, or is not going to help you for very long. People will leave, they won't like it, and it will leave you a very lonely leader. We talked very briefly about culture, and culture is an answer to the question, how do we do things around here? Think about how your team does things, both for the good and for the not so good, the not so helpful, and what can you do to address it? Because how a culture is how it feels, and how we feel is how we perform. So here are some next steps with the last few minutes that we have. I have some resources that I would love to gift you if you are interested in them. The first is a management tool. It's Impactful Review Meetings Guide. It's a guide for managers to make those one-to-one review meetings maybe a little bit more, dare I say, fun and productive for those that maybe don't love doing that kind of stuff. There is a summary sheet, the 3 mindset barriers. If you want that to look at, to glance at, I will happily send it to you. Just send me an email at jamescook@nextlevelcpi.com, and I will happily send you one or both of these resources. As I said at some point in the last 45 minutes, I have a podcast. I'm on there with one of my coaching mentors. It's called Espresso Briefing, and it's all about taking business leadership books and not so much summarizing them as taking the lessons from them and talking about how to make them a bit more real. So if you like that, check out anywhere that does podcasts and you'll find us. I'm speaking about culture in a talk called Aligned, Resilient and Scalable on this Monday, in fact, at 4:15 BST. And you can sign up. The in-person tickets are all gone. but you can sign up in person at that link there. And if you'd like the electronic link, again, send me an email and I'll happily send it through to you. Or we can connect on LinkedIn, and you can scan that little QR code. It will take you straight to my LinkedIn page, hit the connect, and yeah, we can talk more there. And now I ask you, with the last few minutes, are there any more questions?
Nothing further has cropped up yet, although Julia, to your question, yes, there will be a recording. I think Julia had to jump out, James, and didn't want to miss any of the advice that you have given. So there will be a recording that we'll share on our YouTube page. And I will also be sharing a quick recap and some of the sort of key takeaways that I took on Workplace. And I'll make sure to share a copy of that final slide for the resources, and also a couple of those book recommendations that James very kindly shared as well. We're getting lots of comments saying thank you so much, James. They loved the conversation. I did as well. You know, I love the idea of sort of making those one-to-one meetings more fun. I think that's a useful resource for anyone who's a leader, but actually even someone who's part of a team and may want to share it with their leadership as well. So I'm definitely going to be looking into that. But yeah, thank you so much, James. I think it's been a really interesting and useful conversation, and equally for being kind and generous enough to share some of those resources with us as well. I know a number of people, I'm sure, will be following up with you afterwards.
Cool. Well, thank you all for joining. Alice, thank you for having me. And yeah, if you have any more questions that you'd like to just email me through, that's absolutely fine. I can happily share the slides as well.